In regular places all over America, the lights are going out. No, I don't mean street lights or any other kind of electronic gizmo. I'm talking about a different kind of light, a vastly more important kind of light. I'm talking about the kind of light that comes from within you. I'm talking about how, all over the country, Americans are losing hope in our most basic social agreements. I've never seen this idea discussed in any other publication or financial research paper, but it's this change that worries me the most about our country today. And I know if you think about it and you look closely at what's happening, you will agree. This kind of light is developed from living with a purpose, from learning how hard work leads to success, and believing fundamentally that you're being treated fairly, from knowing that success, at least on some level, is possible for everyone in our country. This is the light that comes from a productive career, a sense of personal accomplishment and independence, from a happy family life. And it's this light, which should be inside all of us, that's disappearing across our country. It's being replaced with a kind of animosity we haven't seen in our country in almost 100 years. I'm sure you've noticed all the angry political rhetoric, which includes socialism's soaring popularity and one crackpot scheme after another to take money from others, like direct payments from the government to all citizens, what they call universal basic income, like totally free healthcare, Medicare for all, they say, and most shockingly, demands for slavery reparations from Democratic leaders. Pardon me for saying something that's politically incorrect, but I don't think anyone alive today was ever a slave or a slaveholder. And if you think we owe the descendants of slaves lots of money, imagine the bill Native Americans will soon present. Likewise, have you ever known anyone who received health care at a VA hospital or strictly from Medicare? If you do, you know it's a complete disaster. But that's what a government monopoly in healthcare looks like. Why would anyone want that? These ideas are all the result of the lights that are going out inside people all around our country. And there's a reason it's happening, which very few people understand. But there's a reason so many Americans are losing hope, losing their sense of independence, and losing their dignity. There's a reason so many people are turning to the failed lies of socialism. It's because most Americans are being left behind. They're being left behind in a way we've never, ever seen before. The gap between the rich and the poor has always existed, but it's never, ever existed at this level. And it's never happened so fast before. Every day, thousands and thousands of Americans are ascending into a mind-boggling new level of wealth, something well beyond what millionaires could have afforded a decade ago. And instead of plateauing, these changes are continuing to power this new class of super rich, higher and higher, turning millionaires into billionaires. I know because I'm one of them. And on it goes for the few of us who understand what's happening and how to profit from it. But what about everyone else? Well, that's why I've recorded this video. All over our country, more and more people are giving up. They don't understand what's happening or why. And no one on either side of the political aisle will explain it. Probably because they don't fully understand it either. Most Americans only know that even though they work harder and harder every year, they end up with less and less, and with more debt. But I know exactly why that is happening. I've spent parts of my life on both sides of this equation, and I want to make sure that you are on the right side going forward, because it's all about to get a lot worse. My name is Porter Stansberry. I grew up in a very average 3-bedroom middle-class home outside of Orlando, Florida. I wasn't given anything special as a child. I went to public schools, and I've worked all my life. First as a lifeguard at Walt Disney World to help finance my college education, and then later as an elite investment analyst for one of the wealthiest men in the world, who now owns hundreds of thousands of acres of real estate in Central America, South America, the United States, and Europe. I first saw what was happening about 20 years ago, and I took a personal chance. I started my own company to capitalize on this huge new trend of wealth creation that I could see was emerging. I'm sitting at my desk at my company's office recording this video today. Since starting my own firm, I've created huge amounts of wealth for my family, our clients, and for many of my partners and employees, all by understanding exactly why the lights are going out all across America. Now look, I want to make it really clear. I don't think any of this is fair. And yes, I've been able to take advantage of these problems and they've been good for me personally. But I'm sad and terrified for what this massive new wealth trend is doing to our country. And I know it's going to continue to accelerate. It's all going to get more powerful and become even more disruptive. You see, while millions of Americans have been left behind so far, tens of millions more will be left behind in the coming decade if they don't understand what to do. Meanwhile, anyone who knows what's happening and knows what lies at the root of these trends, well, they have an opportunity to profit in a huge way. It's not hard if you truly understand what's happening. I'm going to explain it all right now, and I promise you've never heard about this concept anywhere else ever before. The good news is you don't have to become one of my customers to take advantage of any of this. All you have to do is get a handle on the concepts I'm about to outline. We don't need socialism in America. We need a far better understanding of how this new economy works so that more and more people can benefit. And the United States can continue to be the greatest place in the world for anyone to rise up and make their own way in life. Believe me, the more people who understand these trends, the better for all of us. And that includes you. It's not too late, but it's getting close. All of these trends are beginning to converge into a new, even more powerful wave of innovation and economic disruption. This new wave of change is already impacting huge corporations and the political system in our country, but it's just beginning to gain traction. In another year or two, anyone who doesn't fully understand this new wave will be left behind. We've seen hundreds of billionaires created as technology roiled huge existing industries like telecommunications and newspapers, and those changes sent millions of Americans out of work. But what comes next will dwarf those changes. You see, technology is about to change capitalism itself. These changes, by the way, were all predicted as long ago as the 1930s by a Nobel Prize-winning economist. It's scary how accurate his predictions have been so far, and it's even scarier once you understand what he says about the future. You'll see exactly what I mean in a minute. What we're ultimately looking at here will be the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind, bigger than any political revolution by a huge margin. And it won't just be the middle class that gets left behind. All across America, millions and millions of lights are about to go out. These lives are going to be destroyed by changes only a handful of Americans understand right now. Even wealthy people will be shocked at how quickly their money is going to disappear. I've just published a list of companies that our research shows are going to be decimated, including household favorites like Harley-Davidson and AT&T. On the other hand, some people are going to make a fortune. In fact, it's already started. According to Barron's magazine, at least 20,000 people and maybe as many as 200,000 people have already become millionaires because of this single shift. The crazy thing is roughly 90% of the entire US population isn't taking advantage of what's going on and is getting left behind, according to the latest survey. What we're talking about is the equivalent in computer science to Einstein's theory of relativity in physics. I know that doesn't mean much to you right now, but let me spell out exactly what's happening and how to ensure you are on the right side of this once-in-a-lifetime seismic shift. The lights are going out all over America because of what I call the transition.
Amazon has taken over retail. I'm sure you've noticed. Uber has taken over the cab business. I'm sure you've noticed. Apple and Spotify have taken over the music industry. I'm sure you've noticed. Netflix and other forms of streaming have taken over movies and TV. Google has taken over data. LinkedIn and others have taken over job search and hiring. Expedia and TripAdvisor have taken over the travel business. The list goes on and on. In short, for many years now, we have been in a transition from an industrial era to the computer age. We have moved from a paper-based analog economy to a digital world. For some, that transition has been devastating. In 2019 alone, an estimated 12,000 more retail stores will close. I'm sure you're familiar with the big closings at places like Sears and JCPenney, Kmart, Best Buy, and Macy's. But did you know 390 Family Dollar stores will close this year, 650 Dress Barn stores will close, and 2,100 Payless Shoe Source stores will also close. The Gap is now shutting down 230 stores. Walgreens is shutting down 200 stores. Pier 1 closing 145 stores. And most shockingly, even Walmart is shutting down stores this year, 17 in all. Thousands and thousands of Americans are losing their jobs as this result. Many of them are also going to lose the light that lives inside them. They're going to lose their sense of independence. They're going to lose their dignity. Investment bank UBS estimates another 75,000 retail stores will be closed by 2026. Meanwhile, the money that's been made by those who have capitalized on this digital trend has been incredible. $100 invested in the very early days of Amazon, which I first recommended people invest in back in 1999, would now be worth more than $130,000. The same amount invested in Apple would now be worth more than $45,000, and in Netflix, $34,000. Personal wealth has shifted dramatically. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is now richer than Warren Buffett. The cloud computing software kings at Salesforce, they just built the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And the hottest real estate market in America, where's that? Get this. It's Tacoma, Washington. Huh? What? Tacoma, Washington? Why? Because the previous hottest real estate market, Seattle, home to digital companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Tableau and Expedia, became unaffordable to all but the uber wealthy. When you look at the 10 richest Americans according to the most recent full-year ranking, this shift from an analog economy to a digital world becomes obvious. Only Warren Buffett and the Koch brothers made their fortunes outside of this shift from an analog world to the digital society. I call this new class of digital millionaires and billionaires the digerati. And after figuring out this trend myself about 20 years ago, I'm now one of them. And so today, I want to introduce you to this world. I want you to join us because something big, really big, is coming next. And the truth is, while those who understand this trend are getting rich, those who don't, which includes the vast majority of America, are getting left farther and farther behind. Consider the simple example of what's about to come, which is only the tip of the iceberg, but it's easy for everyone to understand, and as a result has been widely reported in the mainstream press. Did you know that there are 3.5 million truck drivers in America today, and that driving a truck is the most popular job in more than half of U.S. states? Today, the technology to completely replace 90% or more of those jobs is already available. Self-driving trucks started making deliveries in Nevada as early as 2015. The mining company, Rio Tinto, has 73 autonomous trucks hauling iron ore 24 hours a day in Australia. The U.S. Postal Service just started testing self-driving trucks on a 1,000-mile mail run between Phoenix and Dallas. Wired magazine ran a story titled, "Self-Driving Trucks Are Ready to Do Business in Texas." Now look, rolling out all these self-driving trucks will take time, maybe 3 to 5 years or more. But self-driving trucks will be here way before self-driving cars, because highway driving is 90% of what truckers do, and the economic incentives for self-driving trucks is enormous, much higher than self-driving cars. But think about what will happen to our country when 3.5 million very hardworking middle-class truckers who can earn up to $100,000 a year or more are suddenly out of work, or see their wages collapse because highly skilled drivers are no longer needed. These families probably represent 10 million people in total, and they are the economic foundation of thousands of small rural communities. They are the heart of America. What will happen when these people lose hope? What will happen when the light that lives inside them goes out? What will happen when they see that by killing their jobs, digital firms like Uber and Google are able to reap billions in extra profit by sucking every penny out of America's heartland and pouring it into yet even more expensive housing in places like Seattle and San Francisco? That is how the lights are going out. And that's just the start of how this wealth shift is going to get worse. There's just no question that GPS, 5G, wireless, LIDAR technology, and other innovations will soon put millions and millions of truckers out of work. And as those lights go out, the consequences to America's political union will be perilous. But that's not even the most important change that's happening. You see, self-driving cars and trucks, robotics for warehouses and manufacturing, and artificial intelligence to replace human interactions are normal innovations. They're the result of engineers getting more out of technology that's actually been around for a long time. GPS, for example, was first used by the Department of Defense in the late 1970s and was available for civilian use in the 1980s. Professors at Dartmouth were developing artificial intelligence computer programs as far back as the late 1950s. And while I know that self-driving vehicles will have a massive impact on truckers and car manufacturers and taxis, for example, robotics will destroy millions of manufacturing jobs, and AI will eliminate the need for millions of customer service jobs. All of these changes are relatively minor compared to the real big tidal wave that's coming. That's because there's an entirely new technology that's going to change everything. And this breakthrough has nothing to do with hot new technologies the mainstream media is obsessed with these days, like electric cars and artificial intelligence, 5G, and robotics. This tidal wave is actually much, much bigger, but very few people understand it. It's the next huge leap forward for the digerati, the people who have been getting rich while most Americans have been left far behind. Throughout history, there have always been periods in time when new innovations changed everything about how human societies functioned and were structured. For example, it's not commonly appreciated, but the invention of the gin mill, which was an engine applied to cotton farming, radically altered not only the textile industry, but it led directly to the eradication of slavery because it made labor vastly more efficient. This one innovation created massive amounts of wealth, but it also set the American South on the path to war. While humanity gained enormously as a whole, many people were left behind in the American South, where deep poverty remains even to this day. Or consider what's happened since the invention of the integrated circuit and transistor around 1950. Very few people realized how transistors and the ability to combine electricity with logic gates would empower computing in ways that no one could have possibly imagined. But unless you understood this trend, commonly known as Moore's Law, and unless you could see how vastly more powerful and vastly cheaper computers are going to change everything in the modern economy, it's very likely you never participated in the biggest creation of wealth so far in human history. Even Warren Buffett, the best investor who ever lived, and Bill Gates' his best friend, even Buffett never bought Microsoft because he never really understood how Moore's Law would impact the software industry and enable Microsoft's massive, almost unbelievable ascent. Most people don't remember this, but in the late 1990s, Microsoft grew so wealthy and so powerful and was so dominant that the U.S. government intervened to break up the firm. Without the government's intervention, many argue Google would not even exist today. That's the type of power and wealth major technological breakthroughs generate. You see, there are just these seminal moments in history, like when Einstein published his theory of relativity, or when Genentech first used genetic engineering to produce human insulin, or when Claude Shannon wrote the mathematical theory of communication, which launched the modern optical networking revolution. These breakthroughs truly changed everything about the world we live in. But unfortunately, most people never understood what was happening, ever, until it was way too late. They don't see or understand these hidden technological forces that are growing just under the surface. And then, as those forces emerge like a tidal wave, they overwhelm everything that stands in their way. Well, one of those moments occurred recently, on October 31st, 2008. You probably remember that period in time. There was a huge global financial crisis going on, and Americans were defaulting on almost 20% of the mortgages in the country. But in another 20 or 30 years, that financial crisis will be completely forgotten. I know that sounds hard to believe today, but the truth is, that period of time, the fall of 2008, will forever be known as the moment when a new technology emerged that changed absolutely everything about the way money, banking, commerce, and property rights are managed. This technology changes everything about how capitalism is structured. You see, on October 31st, 2008, an anonymous computer scientist laid out in precise detail a new method of linking the power of computers and fiber optic networks to money. He created a kind of money that gains in value in direct relation to the power of computing globally. And everything, absolutely everything, is going to change as a result. If you think technology is leaving most Americans behind already, what's coming next should terrify you, and it terrifies me. The group I call the Digerati, the huge network of Americans who have been developing new technologies for decades and growing ever richer as a result, the Digerati has built their own currency, and it lies completely outside the control of any government. This group and their new money are soon going to leave everyone behind. Every last person in this country and in every other country in the entire world. This breakthrough represents a critically important new way for humans and machines to communicate and to cooperate. And there's no doubt it will result in a radical reset of our entire global financial system. You see, this new wave means an entirely new kind of money and an entirely new kind of ownership structure for virtually every important asset in the world. It's literally a new technological form of capitalism itself. This is much bigger than a simple evolutionary step in technology. It's what they call a hard fork. It's a change that after it happens can never be undone. It's a change that permanently changes entire societies. The thing is, because this change is still in its infancy, many people don't yet understand its potential. They don't see the future impact this breakthrough will bring. But the Digerati, the richest, the most well-connected people in the business world today, they certainly do. Billionaire tech venture capitalist Marc Andreessen, who embodies exactly what the Digerati stand for. Marc Andreessen was the person who first created an internet browser for the public. The company was called Netscape. Marc Andreessen is sort of the high priest of the Digerati. And speaking of this new breakthrough, he said, "The consequences of this breakthrough are hard to overstate. We're quite confident that when we're sitting here in 20 years, we'll be talking about this technology the way we talk about the internet today." Bill Gates, who, as I'm sure you know, was the founder of Microsoft, another leading member of the Digerati, he said something similar in a recent video. Innovations like vaccines and high-yielding crops have changed the future for billions of people. We're on the cusp of another breakthrough innovation. Jack Ma is the founder of China's biggest tech company, Alibaba, and he says this technology could change our world more than people imagine. American broadcaster and filmmaker Max Kaiser, he says that if this technology had been around sooner, the tragedy of 9/11 would have never happened. That's why the richest and most competitive companies in the world are now quietly implementing this new monetary technology, even though it's not making headlines yet in the mainstream press. Amazon began using this in May of 2018. The makers of Budweiser beer quietly began using it in March of last year. Around the same time, Google began using it too. Visa and MasterCard, pretty much the backbone of the global financial system, they were among the first big companies to try out this new technology way back in 2016. And Starbucks first gave it a try just a few months ago in May of 2019. The smartest and richest people and companies in the world are learning everything they can and testing this new technology because it represents a critical way for humans and machines to communicate, cooperate, and do business. But again, because this technology is still in its infancy, most people don't yet fully recognize what's happening. The sad thing is, as the lights go out for so much of America, everyone who has been left behind will turn on each other. And that'll create a global crisis unlike anything the world has ever seen before. It won't be a war of nationalism. It won't be between countries and big armies. The coming conflict will be a war of the digerati. The conflict will be between people who understand how to use this new technology and everyone else who doesn't. And that battle has already begun. Please heed this warning and help others understand it too. This is a seminal moment which will determine your family's fate for years to come. Just like Amazon took over retail, and just like Uber has taken over cabs, digital technology is now taking over our money. It's changing how we use it, save it, spend it, and enter into deals and contracts to earn it, lend it, and invest it. I promise you, in only a few years, governments will discover the majority of the world's economic power has fled to digital money, a form of money that can't be seized, can't be taken by force, and only retains its value where property and privacy are respected. We've known this was coming for years. Back in 1999, Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman explained how it would happen. He wrote, "One thing that's missing, but will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A. The way I can take a $20 bill and hand it over to you, and you may get that without knowing who I am." Why is this inevitable? Several reasons. First, as I'm sure you probably know, our entire financial system as it exists today is a mirage, based on unlimited paper money and endless credit created by the government. Today, our government prints billions of dollars literally out of thin air. Did you know that again this year, the U.S. government is set to spend another $1 trillion more than it takes in revenue? Even more disturbing, 25% of the government debt issued around the world now has negative interest rates. Negative interest rates, by the way, mean you have to pay the government to lend them your money. In Switzerland, some banks have announced they will begin to charge clients 0.75% per year for large deposits. Yeah, you read that correctly. The banks want you to pay them to hold on to your money. History will look back on this period with disbelief that so many people could have been fooled for so long into thinking that this was a good idea. These distortions in our monetary system have caused prices for our most critical needs, like healthcare, housing, and education, to soar to levels beyond the reach of the middle class. That's why the rich get richer while everyone else falls behind. The rich have access to assets that benefit from all of this money creation, like stocks, real estate, art, and private businesses. Meanwhile, the lights continue to go out for most Americans as they go deeper and deeper into debt, falling farther behind. Today, American companies and families are deeper in debt than ever before in history. Students owe $1.5 trillion in college debt. Americans owe over $1 trillion on our credit cards. We owe more than $1 trillion for car loans. Sure, this current system has been great for the wealthy, but we all know it simply cannot last. The financial promises we've made simply can't be kept much longer. The debts we've accrued, they can't possibly be repaid. Even worse, anyone holding traditional currencies like dollars, euros, or yen is losing wealth every single day. Even if your bank is not yet charging you to hold your money, the worthless currencies issued by today's governments lose roughly half their purchasing power every single decade. Look at this chart. It shows you how quickly your saved dollars lose value over the years. And if all that wasn't bad enough, with the permission of our government, the banks, credit card firms, and other money institutions now get away with ripping off the public at every turn. Banks pay you nothing in interest, yet they charge you $3 or more just to get your own money out of an ATM machine, or $50 to send a bank wire. Credit card companies get away with charging 20% interest on late payments, but if the credit card company allows someone to fraudulently open up a new credit card in your name, they call it identity theft, and it's somehow your fault. Credit card companies charge businesses 2 to 3% of every purchase made. Trust me, many businesses, including mine, will soon never, ever accept a credit card that charges my company 3% of every sale. It should be so obvious to anyone who bothers to take a careful look. Today's entire financial system is corrupt, broken, and simply will not last. The good news is there's a new system of money that's emerging, and it's going to radically change everything about capitalism in the next few years. Believe me, if you miss out on this development, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Today, nearly every member of the Digerati I know is desperately seeking a way out of our current highly regulated, public, and bankrupt global financial system. They are getting rid of dollars and moving their money into other assets, including not only gold, but also digital tokens and digital currencies like Bitcoin. Now look, I know what you're probably thinking. For years, I was extremely skeptical about Bitcoin too, because I didn't understand the software. But let me show you some things about Bitcoin I can guarantee the general public doesn't understand. Most people watch Bitcoin soar to almost $20,000 per coin, only to fall back to around half that value today. And they have been completely baffled by this huge creation of wealth. It's even been compared to the Dutch tulip mania of the 1600s, when an entire nation was swept into a frenzy, and the price for a single tulip bulb soared to 10 times the annual earnings of a skilled laborer. But it wasn't until I invited a man named Brendan Bloomer to my office that I began to fully grasp what is now happening. Brendan is one of the world's foremost authorities on digital currencies, and he's a leading member of the Digerati. Brendan flew to my office on his private jet, and at the age of 32 is worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of a powerful digital platform he's built. During our conversation, I began to figure it out. At first, it made no sense to me that Bitcoin's computer code could be mined, or that such a system could be devised to link rising computer productivity to the cost of producing these secure blocks of data. But the code, when you finally understand it, is a breakthrough of historic proportions. Like I said, it's the equivalent in computer science to Einstein's theory of relativity in physics. This new technology represents a critically important way for humans and machines to communicate and cooperate. And I'm certain the things I've learned about Bitcoin recently will shock you, even if you think you know a lot about it already, or even if you've never considered buying it before. For one, there's something very important about Bitcoin that even the world's experts haven't figured out yet. You see, most people think that Bitcoin is finite, and they predict that the last Bitcoin will be mined at a certain date in the future around 2140. But they're wrong. Bitcoin isn't finite at all, not in an economically meaningful way. The last Bitcoin will never be mined, no more than the last barrel of oil will ever be pumped out of Texas. I'll explain to you why this matters and why it's such a big deal. And this new understanding of Bitcoin also portends a huge move higher in its price. Bitcoin could soon trade well over $100,000 per coin, and then well over $1 million per coin, all within the next decade or so. Another argument people make is that Bitcoin has no real value, but that is not true at all, because the quality of money matters. How well money serves as a unit of exchange and as a store of value has huge implications in whether or not it will succeed and be adopted. One thing all the critics get wrong about Bitcoin, for example, is that they don't understand why it's the perfect form of money for our digital, computer-driven world. The truth is, Bitcoin will continue to be one of the world's most favored currencies for a very, very long time. And this is not just my theory. You see, unlike most journalists and investors, I'm also a student of economic history. And one of the most powerful forces in economics and human behavior proves this fact over thousands of years. Gresham's law explains what happens throughout history when there are two or more different types of money of different values in an economy, just like the dollar and Bitcoin today. Gresham's law says that inevitably people spend the bad money of lesser value and they hoard the good money as savings because it will be worth much more in the future. Take, for example, the U.S. government's decision to stop using real silver in our coins back in the 1960s. The U.S. government passed the Coinage Act of '65, which eliminated real silver from the production of dimes and quarters. Well, what do you think happened next? Just like Gresham's law described, the bad money, that is the coin without any silver, soon drove all the good money, the coin with silver, out of circulation. People took all the pre-1965 coins out of circulation and have hoarded them away. That's why you almost never find one in daily use today. As Gresham's law says, bad money chases out good. And it's happening again today. All around the world, people are desperately seeking a way out of our highly regulated, public, and bankrupt global financial system. They're getting rid of dollars and moving their money into gold and cryptocurrencies. It's funny. People today make accusations about how Bitcoin and digital currencies are used mainly for criminal activities. But mark my words, in a few years they will be saying the exact opposite. In the very near future, cash will be the only currency for criminals because Bitcoin is pseudonymous. It's not anonymous. What I mean by that is, although your name isn't attached to your Bitcoin account, every Bitcoin transaction is tracked and recorded forever in a permanent record where everyone can see it. That means police and the FBI can track Bitcoin a lot easier than cash, gold, jewelry, or art. The truth is, the dollar, the euro, and all other fiat currencies are the bad money today, while Bitcoin and gold are the good money that savvy individuals are beginning to hoard. In many ways, Bitcoin is the new gold. It's the new way for savvy investors to get their money out of a collapsing fiat world and into something that will hold its value in years to come. Think of it this way. For many centuries, humans, acting in their own best interest, realized that gold had special properties, which made it a perfect form of money. The really special property of gold was that it was both scarce and inexhaustible. Why? Well, because gold isn't consumed. Thus, the stock of gold grows and continues to grow at roughly the same scale as human ingenuity. There's a strong correlation between the total supply of gold and the total installed horsepower in the world. As humans became able to dominate the physical world through motive technology, engines of various types, mining gold grew progressively easier, and thus more and more gold was produced. However, the more people looked for gold, and the more gold was mined, the harder and harder it became to find. So while the total stockpile of gold always grew, the value of each additional ounce remained relatively constant in real terms. And think about how important that is in the global computer network of today. Just like gold kept up with our mechanical abilities in the industrial age to improve horsepower efficiency, Bitcoin will continue to appreciate at the same pace as Moore's Law, which basically says the capability of our computers double every 2 years. No, that increase in value won't happen in a straight line, but over time it will follow that trend. For the internet to reach its full potential, for it to unleash the incredible power of global cooperation on a much, much larger scale, there needs to be a truly stable exchange of value mechanism whose purchasing power won't be massively impacted by the resulting increase to human productivity. But how do you do that? How do you build a measuring stick that won't be impacted by artificial intelligence? Certainly not with the dollar or any other currency that can be printed out of thin air. Even gold is very likely to become cheaper in real terms in the years to come because scientists will eventually figure out how to break the supply barrier by mining asteroids or seawater or some other radical innovation that will be created by increasing computer power. So what can possibly keep pace with the incredible gains in productivity as predicted and has been realized by Moore's Law? Well, the answer is Bitcoin. In fact, that's what it was designed to do. Just as gold was the perfect proof of work for the age of ever-increasing locomotive power in the industrial age, Bitcoin is the perfect currency and the best stable proof of work and money for the computer age. The important thing for you to know right now, of course, is this. In the near future, Bitcoin will not be worth the $10,000 to $15,000 range it's trading today. It will be worth at least 10 times that amount. As the billionaire venture capitalist Tim Draper says, Bitcoin is to the dollar as the internet is to paper. Draper says a single Bitcoin will be worth $250,000 as soon as 2022. From here on out, Bitcoin will continue to be one of the world's most favored currencies, and it's going to stay that way for a long time. Another thing few people understand about Bitcoin is that unlike fiat currencies, each Bitcoin is divisible to 8 decimal places. That's 0.0000001. And each fraction of Bitcoin, which is called a Satoshi, is worth about 1/100th of a penny in today's dollars. In other words, even as Bitcoin rises in value, it's still easy and possible for anyone to shift as little or as much money as they want into this digital currency. They can buy or sell individual Satoshis. And here's the really critical point you need to understand. What so many people get wrong about Bitcoin is, because we consider ourselves in our age to be modern, we think we can dictate and predict what has and holds value over time. But we can't. In fact, the exact opposite is true. What has and holds value changes radically as technology develops. Do you know, for example, aluminum was once the most valuable metal in the world, even more valuable than gold. Napoleon famously honored his guests by setting their places with aluminum silverware instead of gold. The Washington Monument's 6-pound aluminum capstone, set in 1884, was seen as the most extravagant finishing touch possible. Aluminum was once so valuable because despite the fact that it is the most common metal found in our planet's crust, it's usually found bound tightly to other elements. And it wasn't until the late 19th century that scientists figured out a cheap way to isolate it. When they did, prices plummeted 98% between 1880 and the 1930s. The point is, what we consider valuable and what holds its value changes radically with new technological developments. And that's already happening. Did you know that today, an estimated 90% of the younger generation prefers owning digital currencies to gold, according to Bloomberg? You may not like the sound of that, but it's today's reality, and you better get used to it if you hope to protect and grow your money in the future. The vast and ever-growing power of the internet and of cloud computing and of artificial intelligence, these things are going to reshape our world in ways we can't possibly imagine. And it's all going to happen at an ever-increasing pace that's likewise impossible for our brains to grasp. Faster and faster with ever-increasing rates of change. It's just so fast the human mind can't comprehend it. So what will hold its value tomorrow? What will survive? The coming massive, permanent, and lasting deflation of the post-industrial age? Yeah, I believe gold will still be valuable, but it's simply not going to keep pace with Bitcoin, and it hasn't. I haven't even told you the most important part yet. Yes, it's obvious that Bitcoin will supplant both the US dollar and gold as the most desirable form of reserve currency. That's been clear for years. But what really matters is its impact on the world's existing political and economic order. It's these other changes that should really concern you, especially if you decide that you will never buy Bitcoin. The truth is, Bitcoin isn't merely a currency that will compete with the dollar and with gold. What we're talking about here is not just a new form of money, but actually it's a new way of organizing society. It's a new form of capitalism. Let me show you what's happening. The technology behind Bitcoin is a software innovation called blockchain. One way to think about blockchain is that it's like an internet of transactions. As venture capitalist Mark Andreessen described it to the New York Times, for the first time, a way for one internet user to transfer a unique piece of digital property to another internet user, such that the transfer is guaranteed to be safe and secure. Everyone knows that the transfer has taken place, and no one can challenge the legitimacy of the transfer. The consequences of this breakthrough are hard to overstate. It's a way to exchange money or assets between parties with no pre-existing trust. But, and here's the critical thing, instead of being run by a company or a government, it runs on a distributed network of computers. In other words, basically a collection of all the computers that are using it. Bitcoin is a way of keeping score and exchanging value on the blockchain, just like the dollar is a way of keeping score and exchanging value in business and transactions today. And I promise you this, the blockchain is going to transform our financial system. It's already happening, and it cannot be stopped. If you don't believe me, that's fine, but please listen to one of the most powerful people on Wall Street. Blythe Masters built J.P. Morgan's derivatives and commodities desk into a global juggernaut and pioneered the derivatives market. She knows the inner workings of Wall Street better than just about anyone in the world. And today, Masters says, I would take it, the blockchain technology, about as seriously as you should have taken the concept of the internet in the 1990s. It's a big deal, and it's going to change the way our financial world operates. Believe me, the digerati knows what's coming. Buried deep in one of J.P. Morgan's annual reports, the bank finally admitted it too. Both financial institutions and their non-banking competitors face the risk that payment processing and other services could be disrupted by technology such as cryptocurrencies that require no intermediation. The blockchain offers the possibility of not only a new form of money, but new ways to simply and safely construct legal contracts and agreements, which will power an incredible revolution in human ingenuity and freedom, allowing people to do things with money that was never possible before. You see, with the invention of the blockchain, there are a huge number of financial innovations just over the horizon. Things like smart contracts and new ways of transferring value around the world, whole new platforms that enable individuals to connect in new ways that were impossible before the advent of blockchain technologies like Bitcoin. Yes, this is all very new, and it's changing incredibly fast. But the truth is, all of this stuff was predicted by a Nobel Prize-winning economist many, many years ago. I told you about one Nobel Prize-winning economist already, Milton Friedman. He predicted the concept of Bitcoin back in 1999. But Friedman is not the only Nobel Prize-winning economist to predict this incredible shift now happening in our economy. Ronald Coase won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1991, and his prediction is from a paper he wrote way back in 1937 called The Nature of the Firm. Coase explained how companies exist because they reduce transaction costs and reduce all kinds of inefficiencies compared to people doing all kinds of work on their own. But Coase said the firm would no longer be needed in the same way if these inefficiencies were removed, and property rights were easier and cheaper to track and enforce. And that's exactly what the blockchain does. I'm sure that all sounds a little confusing, so let me just show you one quick example of how blockchain and Coase's Nobel Prize winning prediction will radically change the economy over the next few years. Think about Uber, the car service company. Uber, as you know, destroyed taxi cabs. Uber made it easier, cheaper, and more convenient to get a ride wherever you want to go. But here's the thing. Bitcoin and the blockchain, according to Coase's Nobel Prize winning prediction and the most innovative blockchain developers, will soon destroy Uber. How? Well, here's what I mean. Very soon, sooner than most people think, the blockchain will make Uber, the company and its fees, completely irrelevant and unnecessary. You see, there will soon be a simple blockchain platform for anyone who needs a ride and anyone who wants to provide that service. You'll no longer have to trust that Uber has found you a safe driver. Instead, on the taxi riding blockchain platform, you'll be able to see all the available drivers near you and in much more detail than Uber could ever provide. You'll not only see a potential driver's first name and rating and the type of car, but you'll also have access to their full driving record, credit score, full written reviews, a detailed list of other jobs they hold, insurance information and records, car service and inspection details, registered complaints, number of rides safely completed, and much more. You, as a rider, will choose this blockchain platform over Uber because it is far more transparent, more trustworthy, and it will be a lot cheaper. Drivers will choose it because they no longer have to give Uber 25% of every fare. And presto, just like that, the need for Uber as a business and hundreds of other similar middlemen like this will completely disappear. A man named Vitalik Buterin is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He's a leading member of the Digerati, and he's famous because he created a blockchain platform called Ethereum, which allows people and businesses to figure out how to incorporate blockchain technology into their businesses. Buterin says, instead of putting the taxi driver out of a job, blockchain puts Uber out of a job and lets the taxi drivers work with the customer directly. Buterin's platform, by the way, is now being used by Amazon, Anheuser-Busch, MetLife, Google, Microsoft, Comcast, IBM, MasterCard, Visa, Cisco, British Petroleum, Samsung, Walmart, Starbucks, Fidelity, Northern Trust, Citigroup. I could go on. Virtually every leading major U.S. corporation. These companies are getting involved right now with blockchain technology because they are terrified of being left behind. Remember, the coming war won't be a war of nationalism. It won't be between big countries and big armies. The coming conflict is going to be a war between the Digerati, between people who understand how to use blockchain technology and everyone else. If you remember just one thing from my talk today, please remember this. What Bitcoin and blockchain essentially do is allow regular people like me and you to have new ways of conducting commerce, which root around large companies and big governments because these entities are expensive and they cannot be trusted. Soon, hundreds and hundreds of large institutions we rely on as middlemen in our commercial transactions will be virtually powerless. It won't happen overnight, but it's 100% inevitable. And trust me, the big corporations are terrified. This is why Facebook is trying to co-opt the technology by launching its own digital coin. But the value of Facebook's coin is going to be linked to the failing currencies of the world's central banks and controlled ultimately by Facebook's corporate servers. A phony cryptocurrency like this one will only introduce more and more people to the technology, and then as soon as they understand it, it'll drive millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of people to start using Bitcoin. The critical point you must understand is this. What we are talking about is not just a transition of our current money system. It's not just about cryptocurrencies. It's also a complete change in how we exchange money, how we agree to work and get paid for it, how we make legal agreements involving money, and how we buy and own virtually everything, stocks, cars, houses, and more. This change, like all the others we've discussed so far, is inevitable and can't be stopped because the technology is already out. It's already underway. And the governments that try to stop it are going to be like governments that tried to stop newspapers or the internet or cars. Governments that try to stop blockchain are going to doom their societies to poverty. They're going to doom their entire countries to be left behind. People who ignore this transition will, at the very least, miss out on extraordinary gains. And at the worst, well, they could ultimately lose nearly everything as people flee fiat currencies like the euro and the dollar. That's why now is the time to act. You need to get the facts for yourself and learn the small, simple steps that you can take right now. This is a whole new kind of wealth, and it's emerging so fast. It's a whole new kind of economic power, and it's like nothing you have ever seen before. If you think technology has changed our world so far, just imagine how much faster huge new amounts of wealth are going to be created and how much new power will be aggregated via this new digital currency. The simple truth is that the world has never seen a tool that's unlocking so much economic value so quickly for so many people around the world. And once you understand the even greater implications of Bitcoin and the blockchain it's built on, you will realize how transformative this will all be. The blockchain allows far more direct interaction between free and private individuals. It removes the need for virtually all of the functions of the state and the corporation. It's all happening right now. It's probably happening even to people you know well. So how well do you understand blockchain technology? How familiar are you with Bitcoin? Are you at risk at being left behind? If the answer to that question is yes, then what should you do now?